show should be out of sight.
This is where the mind meets the magic. We dive a little deeper every time. Theme parks, cruise ships, and travel. If you don't listen, maybe now it's time. This is where the mind meets the magic. We dive a little deeper every time. Theme parks, cruise ships, and travel. If you don't listen, maybe now it's time.
Hello and welcome to Mousekast, the podcast where the mind meets the magic. Mousekast, Mousekast, Mousekast. For those of you listening on the audio podcast right now, you have no idea why we're doing this. Hawk is actually flashing the Mousekast logo right in front of our faces here. It's another great reason you should watch us live, as we do every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern here on Mousekast on our Facebook page or on YouTube. Hey guys, I'm back. And you know what? I decided to take care of the wind-blown hair look so that I didn't have that a second time there.
Well, we appreciate that, Chuck, but we're also glad to hear you had a phenomenal cruise and enjoyed some time away. You were missed.
Yeah, I will tell you what I was really thinking about. You know, I had a really hard time, stepping away from Mousekast for 1 week. In fact, I think we've got a photo of just how difficult of a time I had with it. I think, Hawk, we've got that we could. Yeah, I was really struggling here to take some time off and not think about you guys. So I took one for the team and decided to enjoy a week there.
And I do notice your hair is rivaling the wildness of my beard. So
yes, there you go.
I understand totally what you got going on. I'm excited for this week. There's a lot of things to discuss with this week's show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. So Matt, this is your idea. Take it away of what we're talking about tonight.
All right, so we're going to dust off a Mousekast favorite, and we're going to do a what would Walt do? So kind of put ourselves in Walt's position about certain changes that are coming to, not just Disney, but, other parks as well, and how it influences what Disney, might do or should do, what we think Walt would, or how Walt would react. So I guess we can start it off with the recent announcement of Piston Peak in Cars coming to Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. Some people are kind of just like, I don't know. Some people are really looking forward to it. And so I guess we'll start with Hawk on this one. Hawk, what do you think? What would Walt do in this?
So, this is obviously a very hypothetical question, and I want to say good evening to Chris as well, who's welcoming everybody and welcoming Chuck back. I think, one of the key questions is, what would Walt do is such a hypothetical in this day and age, because the game has changed so much from what Walt did when he was starting out and what he wanted to create. And now you have to level up. Now you have to, open up your mind and create new things. And I think sometimes you can almost overstep what's successful, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it is a saying that holds true for a reason. And I think sometimes we risk diving too deep into an area or changing a thing too much on a we want to make it different, we want to make it exciting, but you risk the blowback of it not being widely accepted or kind of flopping on the idea. And I'm very concerned personally with the new Piston Peak concept, because I think Cars Land itself was such an extraordinary bit. And one of the reasons I really touch on that is if you look at what Disney has released in concept art over the last 3 to 5 years, and then what has become the actual presented experience, you can go to Communicore Hall, you can go to Epcot in the layout of the new garden area, Moana's Journey of Water. Listen, they're good, but they're not what the artwork represented, and they're not what people kind of expected. The one thing I will say that Universal has just nailed out of the park, which is absolutely incredible, is they have nailed their concept art to the T. You're struggling looking at pictures of concept art for Epic Universe to tell the difference between the reality and the drawing. I mean, it is so well done. And I think Disney needs to kind of temper the way that people develop that expectation. Maybe scale some of their creativity back a little bit into reality and present reality to the people. What's going on, guys? So glad you're joining us tonight. But I think you need to bring that reality back a little bit. I think Disney is almost creating a headspace for people that they're elevating up here, and then the reality comes down here, and there's a certain sense of disappointment when they see what they actually get. Let's keep it realistic. Give us what you draw. Give us what you present. Like, I want to see exactly what I saw in the concept art. And I think that's a big miss that Disney's had.
And so, Hawk, to kind of build on that, do you think that, and this is, we talk about blue sky. For those who may not be familiar with it, blue sky is a term that Disney uses when they're literally kind of bubbling up and just coming up with crazy ideas. But do you think that maybe in their blue skying and when they're coming up with some of those initial concept arts, they're going a little too much, that they need to plan it a little bit more and saying, okay, we need to really think about what's reality, not what's less concept, and that idea of, or the concept of concept is very esoteric and, oh, this could change a lot. Maybe, okay, we need to make this a little bit more closer to what reality will be, because you don't want to create this sense of what's called anticipation, where you build up so much anticipation for it, and then the reality comes around and you're going, oh, this isn't what I thought. When it comes to Piston Peak, I am optimistically cautious. I'm gonna wait and pass judgment when I actually see it. However, what I see says I think they're trying to come up with something new and something a little bit different, so that they're not cookie cuttering Cars Land over in California. And I'm kind of 50-50 on that one. I think, this might be, in general, I love the idea of not cookie cuttering. However, this may be one of those times where I think, what, you've got something really good going on here. Maybe build upon that. I mean, you could continue to have a different experience than what's in Cars Land, but as far as the overall theming, maintaining Radiator Springs is just, it's a no-brainer. But nevertheless, there may be reasons for that. So Married to a Disney Addict says, yes, I like this newer concept for Cars area better than the one we got. It has greater detail. And so hopefully this is a little bit more towards what we'll really get. But I just wonder if the real estate's, if it's going to be what we hope.
Chuck, and I'm going to ask Meaghan and Matt to touch on this point, because have you noticed that when we get the original concept art for these ideas, it comes out, then the fans react. And then it seems Disney is actually responding to fan complaints, because one of the big issues with Monsters over in Hollywood Studios was people were freaking out because they were going to remove the fountain that's currently in front of the Muppets. Now it's in the concept art that it's staying there. So does Disney react a little bit? And is that part of the reason that, the concept art changes? And do you feel over the last couple of years, attractions that have been opened, that you've been a little let down based on what was advertised? Like, start with the ladies here. Meaghan, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so this is actually something I thought about as getting ready for this because, again, with the idea of what would Walt do? Walt always had a vision, and it was very clear. I think he'd be very frustrated with the way that Disney does announcements, with the way that they do deadlines because we don't have any, and the way that they do concept art because it's not specific. We talk on the show about how we do wish Disney would be responsive to fan reaction. So this sounds like a good thing, right? That they hear us and that they then make changes based on what we're saying. But I don't think that's what Walt would do because Walt always had a very clear vision and he didn't care what everybody else thought. He would have said, no, this is my vision for monsters or for cars or for villains or for whatever. And he would do it his way in the fact that he was the expert, he was the creator, and he felt that he knew best and that we would get in line once we saw it. But I also think that afterwards, he might have pulled back a little bit. I think one of the things when it comes to these new lands and these new rides that we're getting and some of this stuff, if Walt were still here, I wonder if we'd see this many new pieces being thrown in. I personally think Walt would have told his team last year because in the 2025 year, in the 21st century that we're living in, you can't really do it the way Walt used to, where he just made an announcement, surprised everybody on his team, and it was like, oh, we have to figure this out and we have that much time. I think when Epic was first announced, I think I could see Walt going to his internal team and saying, okay, they announced Epic. I want a fifth gate. I'm going to announce it on this day, and you got to have it up and running by this day. And I can see him giving some like hardcore, this is my expectation here.
So,
but sorry, go ahead, Hawk.
I was going to say, Meaghan, you bring up a great point, and I guess this is a unique way to kind of look at what would Walt do because, you know, Walt had a different mindset in 1955 when he's starting out, and as he started to plan the next park and, you know, stepped into that design field. As time has gone by and society has changed and the expectation has changed, do you think Walt would have changed to adapt to the current aspect more, to be more accepting of, because now we are so concerned with what everyone else thinks, whether it's teenagers are brought up that way, kids are worried about it, parents, coworkers, everybody's so obsessed with likes and approval and social media mindset. Does Walt alter his stage, his own mental sense because of that kind of thing? Or does he stay that, as our friend Jeff Barnes likes to say, disagreeable Walt, and just hold to his guns and say, like it or not, bam, bam, this is the way it's going to be?
Well, before you do that, I do want to jump on one little bit because we've got to make sure we put the proper qualifier in here before you comment, Meaghan. Are we assuming that we have a Walt with a Roy that supports the finances side? Because remember, it was not just Walt; it was Walt and Roy. So are we assuming that there's a Roy with here?
What would Walt and Roy do? Come on, Chucky.
Well, but you know what I mean, though. I mean,
I think Walt pushes the envelope on creative and on financial, regardless of who's sitting in Roy's seat, whether it's Roy or somebody else. I think Walt's always pushing.
And if Walt's still alive today, Chuck, he's not worried about Roy. They've got enough money. Like, let's be honest. Money's not the issue now like it was in 1950.
Fair point, but you understand where I'm at.
I do, because you like to complicate everything and keep it less than simple. But so, but Matt, you know, with that mindset, and I saw you kind of nodding your head a little bit, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think it's a very legitimate question to ask. What would Walt's perspective be if he were around today? Because I think he does think a little differently. How do you feel?
I think it's the ball game's different now, I think, than, you know, back in the day, because I think theme parks were pretty much a dead concept back. They were dying out. There was a few here and there that were still kind of operating. You had like county fairs and stuff like that, you know, travel here and there, and we see what the county fairs are now. It's not like, you know, I'm all set with those rides. But I think in a way he didn't really have any competition. The competition was himself in getting those approvals so people will go to the park and, you know, spending money there, you know, or even like, you know, he was looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, I want a place where, you know, adults and kids can spend time together. And I think with, now with the competition, that mindset changes a little bit because, teenagers and thrill rides and stuff like that. I mean, the way technology has progressed, I think his mindset does change to where he's, instead of, being the leader in the clubhouse, now he's like, okay, I got to continue to be that leader. So how am I going to improve? I'm going to look at what's successful, what's going on around, what's the industry like, and then, take it to a whole new level. I mean, audio animatronics back in the day was like, I had to say a pipe dream, and all of a sudden it's just like we had the Tiki Room, and it was just completely mind blowing to people. And we look at it today like, oh, it's a great AC spot and take a little nap and stuff like that. But back in the day, it was like electricity.
Right.
So,
we're always looking for the next best thing now, right? Like we want
exactly.
the thing that's going to wow us all the time.
What's going to get people to come in and basically spend their money there and vacation there? So he's going to be like, okay, what, instead of him being, this is what you're going to get, it's going to be, okay, what's drawing people to these, to Universal, to like a Busch Gardens or wherever else, like the other.
So I think
stuff like that.
I think you bring up a good point, because I think new rides, always are kind of the attraction, a new experience, a new land, a new hotel, a new restaurant. They're all going to pull people in to check it out, to try to experience something for the first time. Now, a lot of Disney experiences, especially restaurants over the last couple of years, have not been the most successful. Some have flopped pretty hard. Space 220, for example. There are places that have not been as successful as they want. Now, we're being joined right now by another great podcast, if you don't follow it, Married to a Disney Addict. And Matt is probably the one watching right now, although it could be his wife. I have guest appeared on this podcast as well. And it's a great show. But Matt put up a comment. Could you imagine if Walt had $60 billion to spend on parks? Could you imagine if Walt had $60 billion in 1955? I mean, could you that thought just flashed through my head, and I was just like, oh my good Lord, could you imagine if he had that kind of money? Disney would be a whole nother level of, it would have been the Jetsons in real life.
Well, actually, you would have had Epcot. I'll be honest with you. You would have had Epcot, the Epcot that Walt wanted. Yeah, without a doubt. But I think, to the point here that, we always ask, okay, what would Walt do? Well, at least in my opinion, Walt was about probably 2-3 things. Number one, Walt was about the guest experience. Always, always, always the guest experience and story. And the two were hand in hand. You had to have a strong story, and the strong story created an incredible guest experience. And then number 2/3, depending on how you look at that, is cutting edge. He always was looking for that next cutting edge. We were the forefront, not the reactor. In fact, this whole story in this whole episode tonight, we talk about what would Walt do in response to Epic. Actually may not ever happen, because Walt wouldn't respond to Epic because he would already be ahead of Epic, or at least that was his drive, is always to be ahead of. But again, but
do you find some comfort in success? And I think this is one of the things that Disney has faced with reality over the last couple of years. Is Disney felt they are the pinnacle. They are the number one. Universal has always been the redheaded stepchild to Disney. It's always been kind of viewed that way. The reality is Universal is on par with much of what Disney does. It's just on an overall smaller scale, fewer resorts, smaller property, more compressed footprint that they have to fit in. And I mean, the same holds true in Hollywood Universal.
Sure.
As well. It's a very condensed, small park. So, I think there's some reality in Matt kind of nodding his head that, I think Walt might have got a little complacent. And then when Epic gets announced, can they do what we do to that level? Maybe they start hyping it. It becomes more reactionary than I'll see you and raise you $1. It's a little more reactionary. I mean, Walt probably wouldn't have been planning another park. He would have to, like Meaghan said, react to that. He would be quicker to react than I think Disney was at this time.
Yes, and I think that's kind of my point with him, with me thinking that he would set deadlines. This idea that like Disney, at some point they're going to, and they're slowly trickling out, we're going to start construction here. We're going to hope to, we don't have anything. I feel like Walt would have said, guys, we're going to get this going and it's going to happen now. And I want to see movement. I want to see it now. Again, he would take that $60 billion and say, make it happen. I also wonder, and I have a question for you guys. Forget about like new lands, brand new rides, all this stuff. Do you think there are rides, attractions, experiences at the parks that, like Chuck said, because of guest experience, because maybe they don't draw as much attention as they used to, do you think that we have stuff in the parks right now that Walt would have gotten rid of in order to make room for something?
100%. 100%.
I mean, the first two things that popped to my mind, I mean, I love him and he has a cult following, but there's not a real long line for Figment. That's taken up quite a bit of space over there on that side of Figment. Or of
you're picking some fighting words with a lot of people, Meaghan.
I love Figment. I'm one of you. Like, I should wear my earrings. I adore Figment, but maybe Walt would have taken Figment and done something else, and we'd still have Figment. But as it is, I think Walt would look at that space and go, "Yeah, this doesn't work. This isn't drawing it out. Like, we're just no. There's so much potential in this space here." And again, much as I love it, and as much as I will always think of Harrison Ford as him, that Indiana Jones show, I don't think Walt would have had much patience for that. I don't think that would be there anymore. I think those are the two that popped to my mind. And then of course we talk about the that building over by the Disney Junior space.
I agree with Matt on this one. I think Figment is enough of a fan favorite, but I think Figment needs an upgrade. He needs a facelift. I think one of the things, I mean, you're upgrading Test Track for the third time. I understand that, this is a ride that's been sponsored by several companies, and it's a concept that you're trying to build upon and update. And I understand that the sponsorship often is responsible for wanting to update it and keep it going. I get that. But I think Disney, when it comes to Figment, the Winnie the Pooh ride at Magic Kingdom, like, what can you update and improve upon? I struggle with the extreme classics like Peter Pan or It's a Small World. I struggle with recommending that those get some kind of refurb. I think they should, but I think you should try to keep the core aspect of that in there. Chris, I want to touch on something. Chris said he's kind of struggling with a thought right now, thinking if it would fit in with the show or not. I want you guys to all the viewers that are watching, share your thoughts. If it doesn't fit on topic or not, jump in. We want this show to include you and your thoughts and what you've got going through your head. We're doing this for you guys. If you have an off-topic question that you want to ask it. Throw it in the chat. If you pull us off the rails, it's okay. We love Disney. We can change. We can adapt. We can grow and evolve. Please help us out. But
yeah, we absolutely love to have a lot of feedback from all of our viewers. I know officially last week was open mic night. Really, every night's open mic night. So, always throw it out. And again, to talk about what would Walt do, and to Meaghan's point there, be sure to check out episodes 11 and 33 of Mousekast, where we went into great detail talking about what attractions Walt might have kept, might have changed, or might have scrapped.
And I saw Matt nodding his head there for a second, and I'm curious, like, you were in agreement with a couple of things there. Share your thoughts on that, Matt.
Yeah, so I was just going to chime in. You were talking about like refurbing some of the older rides. I think what Walt would do is take like you love technology and expanding technology, taking rides. Say like you mentioned Small World, classic ride, but bring it into this century. Different animatronics. Keep some of the original stuff in there, but update it. The way you see like the Frozen ride with like there's still animatronics, but the way the facial expressions are, it's completely different. So including like you could still keep the concept there, just update it.
I agree.
In Peter
I
Pan,
agree with that.
or you mentioned Peter Pan. Once again, it just needs a lot of these rides, especially Magic Kingdom. I feel like just need a modern touch to them.
You have 8K screens that you can throw up now, or higher, if that matter.
Are you kidding? Have you the Sphere 16K? So the technology's there.
No, I understand, but I mean, we've got to be realistic with what you can easily and economically put into things. I understand your point, Chuck, but I mean, regardless,
$60 million, you can do a 16K.
Okay, but look at Peter Pan right now. That moon was the same moon I saw in 1974. Like, let's upgrade the flyover room. Let's upgrade a couple things and just
and I think this is an important part. Walt said, again, we're back to what would Walt do? Walt said Disneyland will never be complete. Now, what does that mean? That means that it will always be in a state of becoming. But here's the problem. I get concerned that maybe we have reached that state of completion. It's, we can't touch this anymore because we're done with that. We need to go something else. I get worried that that's what we have. That mentality is starting to come into play.
I think that element is coming in a little bit, Chuck, in the sense that people throw a hissy fit over anything changing now. So there's a lot of blowback.
Yeah, which is where I was going with that. Yeah.
And Matt, the other Matt, asked, what is the meaning of life? And Matt, just to be clear, the meaning of life is work is.
So we'll find out what Hawk says the meaning. Of course, isn't it appropriate that he gets hung up right then?
And go to the parks every time you want to. That is the meaning of life, Matt. And I know you and your wife are striving for that, but for now, it's Jersey, and that's okay.
Chris brought up a great comment. In fact, there you go. Thanks, Hawk, for bringing this up. Think of the technology that would have come out of Epcot that would have revolutionized the world as we know it, and what would have evolved from it. And this Epcot, by the way, we're talking about Epcot, the city, and this is where I was kind of going back to, of Walt being on top of it. So the point of what would Walt do? We're presuming that Walt is here. Well, again, he would be over 100 years old, so we're being a little bit putting him in a TARDIS or something like that. But I do think that some of the point of Epcot that Walt wanted would be in play here. And the point there is that he wanted to partner up with the best of industry to come up with the next generation of everything. And that would have been in play. And that's what he would be putting into all of these parks. And it might be partnering with another company. I mean, he did so many partnerships to build Disneyland, and I think that kind of mentality would be continuing. That's Epcot, the city that was originally proposed, and I think even if the city never happened, because let's talk about the reality, I mean, building a city is a pretty big deal. That may not have happened even if Walt was around, but a lot of the values and a lot of the thought processes of that, I think, would be staying. And so cutting edge, partnering for cutting edge would still be around. And so this, he would be saying, okay, and that's why I don't think he would ever be surprised by Epic, because he would already be on top of it.
And I'll give you that. And I will agree with that. We have some great comments tonight. Like I really think this really touches on something to me that I feel like got pulled away because the crowds get too intense. I think the crowds at Disney World have become so packed in on certain days and at certain times that some of this streetmosphere that used to exist and utilizing the live characters out on the streets and doing stuff has been somewhat limited. They've had to put them up in areas where they're looking down on fans rather than interacting with them. But this is a great point by Matt. What Disneyland does better than Disney World is that streetmosphere. They have characters walking around. It's more casually interactive instead of a focused meet and greet. Disney World has tried to do that a little bit, specifically in like Galaxy's Edge and a couple of other locations around the parks where characters do get out and meander a little. You know, you have Kevin walking around at Animal Kingdom. There's other parks where there are random characters around at times. Hollywood Studios is really good about throwing them out in protected areas, but like Chip and Dale on the grass in front of Brown Derby, you will often see out interacting, or maybe Donald and Daisy. That I think is something that I agree with Matt 100%. That like bringing the level of service back up, because post-COVID, quality of service at Disney, I don't care what anybody says, it's not what it was pre-COVID. It's a different vibe. It's a different experience. There is a more entitled mentality in youth and in customers, not just staff. I want to preface that. Part of the damage that has been done is the entitlement of the customer has ruined the experience that has resulted in staff not being where it was pre-COVID. There is such an expectation from everybody, and you have to still understand that in life, my grandfather always used to say, you're not owed anything. Anything you get is a bonus. So be thankful for what these cast members do and share with you. But, you know, you are not entitled to anything. You don't go in because you paid admission. You don't deserve to be treated any different than anyone else in that park that day, because they all paid admission one way or another. We all do. Go ahead, Meaghan.
I definitely think we've seen COVID made it, just lifted it to all new heights on that end. But the Disney magic, period. I mean, Disney, I don't want to say they did it to themselves, but in a way, because I was a college program student back in the early 2000s. It's been over 20 years now. And they're the guests that are grateful to be there, and they love being there because there's Disney magic. But all of this talk of Disney magic, and certainly social media has also made it worse. The idea of pixie dusting or people showing up and wanting an upgrade, they think they're owed the Disney magic because they paid for that. And part of that is COVID, part of it's social media, and part of it is that Disney created so much magic that people started expecting it. And then when you expect something, and you get what you expect, okay, that's fine. But Disney's always outdone itself. So that level is always going to be pushed. And so there's so much like chicken and the egg there. And it's a very scary cycle. But the yelling of the cast members has got to stop.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Absolutely. There's absolutely zero excuse for anybody at any park, anywhere, or frankly, anywhere, to be mean, rude, or bullying anybody, period.
If you're yelling anything other than thank you, you're out of line. But Meaghan, I have a question for you, because this I found interesting, because my daughter actually just took a job working at Epcot, and she was talking about training, and I was very interested to hear something that kind of surprised me. How long, when you did your college program, how long was Traditions?
3 hours.
That's it? 3 hours?
That's it.
Hours?
3 hours.
Wow. Okay. So I
thought it was days.
Yeah, I was told the same by people who had worked there a while ago. I'll just say friends my age. But
we went to training for 2 or 3 days, but Traditions itself was like 3 hours in the morning. 9 to noon, maybe. It was short.
Wow.
But sometimes I wondered, because of the way that because I've talked to college program members over the years too. sometimes I wonder if that was based on what the staff looked like as they were bringing us in, and if they didn't rush some of us through a little bit faster because they needed us to get out on stage and start working our jobs. But
I want to go through traditions for like 3 weeks.
Well, funny, Matt says, I thought it actually was 2 weeks.
No, I thought it was a couple of weeks myself. Matt, I got to say, I just want to go through training at Disney for like 2.5 years and not have to work. Like just that, like
So-
give me the training. I'm good with that. No responsibilities.
I will say again, over 20 years ago now, it's finally fallen off my like actual professional resume. But that college program stayed on my resume up until the last job I got, which was 4 years ago. Because despite the fact that my traditions was only 3 hours, and despite the fact that it was 20 years ago, every single time I did a job interview, I got asked about it because of the level of customer service that Disney demands of its cast members and
100%.
that training. And that is the college program. There are a lot of stories that a lot of us can tell you about the college program, but the number one takeaway that I got was that it was the single most valuable thing on my resume, even as a professional, even after my college education, even after I had other professional experience. The fact that like those cast members, the expectation on them by the people who are watching over them is insanely high. So as those guests are screaming at some poor college kid who's earning minimum wage, maybe thousands of miles away from home, especially if they're working in Epcot, they're not even in their home country. They're probably not even speaking their first language. They are still expected to toe the line and be there for Disney. And a lot of them do. I get really kind of irked at the comments of like, I had a bad cast member experience. Well, everybody's going to have a bad day, but those cast members are doing everything they can. And they're doing a great job.
So I agree with you that they generally do a great job. However, I will play devil's advocate for the customer that customer service is not what it was 5 years ago. And I have had experiences at Disney recently. And listen, we don't go in like some people go in and look for the fight. You know, they look for the opportunity to get a freebie. They look for, things. But, Mark, I don't think it is from what I've heard from.
Welcome, Mark.
But, so one of the things I will say is customer service has deteriorated in the parks. And I think part of it is the fact that you're dealing with ridiculous expectation from customers all day long. I think there was a time where it was much easier to keep a positive attitude. And I've got multiple friends that are cast members. When everybody walks around happy, it's easy to be happy. You're going to the happiest or most magical place on earth. You're going to skip and run and joy. Now you're like, I took out a second mortgage. It's 97 degrees. I'm dehydrated. I got people standing 3 inches from my face in line. I'm not in a good mood. 6 rides are down. And I understand that that's frustrating stuff, but the cast members are also starting to get to that point where there's a little bit of that edge coming back at people. And I hadn't seen that in Disney until post-COVID. And it seems like it's softened up. Part of that is also I help people get employed in the state of Florida. It's very hard to get quality staff. Disney's super strict. You're late 3 times when you're on probation, gone. You're not working for them anymore. You know how many people are punctual to jobs these days? It's a low percentage. It's just so, it's a little bit of you get what you get because of the game that's being played in society today. And I don't think it's a lack of training or anything else, but,
Yeah, so Mark has a great comment, and he says, knowing several people who were in the college program last year, they had vastly different experiences based on where they were and the management had in the area that they worked. So getting back to tonight's topic of what would Walt do, in getting to this whole customer service point, first of all, I don't know that we would have necessarily gotten to this level that we are right now because, again, remember what I said, story and customer service were, and the guest experience were right there hand in hand, that those were the two top priorities. So he would have never let things, I think, get to this point. But nevertheless, let's just say he has transported and he is here. And again, we popped him in a TARDIS and brought him forward in time. This might be the number one response, I'll be honest, to what we're seeing across the way over in Universal. He might be thinking, you know what, we got to get our house in order first. And the guest experience is a number one. We're going to get the guest experience back to what Disney is most known for and what our guests expect of us, which is unparalleled service. And
so, Chuck, I know you had the opportunity to go to Japan.
Yes, I have been to Japan. Yes.
The cultural difference is amazing.
Yeah. You would never, ever, ever, did I say ever, see a guest behave in Japan the way we see guests behave in the parks. Never. It is verboten. They would be shunned and dishonored, literally, if you had a guest behave so badly.
So let me ask this question. Who of the hosts has had a, let's say, unfavorable cast member experience at the parks?
I was going to mention on that quick trip that my wife and I did, we took a bus, and the bus driver, he was very talkative. We were right there at the front, and he sneezed, and I said, "Bless you," and he was just like, I drove yesterday, I sneezed a couple of times, and nobody once said, "Bless you," whatever, stuff like that. And just by me saying that to him, like, made his day, that particular day. A simple gesture that could make a cast member's day just that more, like, they're just super appreciative. And you're just doing something, like, out of the norm. So instead of just, like, it's not so much you're going out of your way to do stuff, but I think, like, if we're talking about cast members, like, kind of not retaliating, but, like, getting a little edgy, and it's kind of like bothering, guests and stuff like that. I think they have to, like, guests as a whole just have to be like, small things can make a big difference for that particular cast member that day. You don't have to go out of your way and, talk to them all the time. Like, I know, like, Hawk, like, you enjoy, like, talking to a bunch of the cast members, getting to know them and stuff like that. But just, like, a simple, just, like, hey, thank you, or, I like to
just saying thank you.
Exactly.
I mean, if you just say thank you to people, it's so appreciated. And if you take a second to talk to the cast members and ask them where they're from, like, read the towns on the name tag. Half the time,
what I do.
Place or you're like, oh, you're from Rhode Island.
I love doing that.
Exactly. I think there's a great point too. You could tell, as Matt says, we love the CMs, as I think we all do, team members at Universal as well. You can tell some love it and others are just working. Seemed like in the past there were more there because they loved it. Nothing wrong with just working, of course, we all have to, but that seems to be a shift. And I will admit that I agree with Matt 100% on this.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are people that, have come into that realm that Disney was, the stories I used to hear from cast members about why they worked at Disney always amazed me. But now it's more, oh, well, I got the opportunity for the college program and I jumped on it, but I'm getting out of here as soon as I can. You know how many college programs kids stay and make that their career and stay at Disney for a long time? I just had the opportunity to get a veteran a job at Universal who came out of the military. He was an aircraft mechanic. He worked on helicopters. We got him a job working on roller coasters. Within a month of being there, he's like, I'm never leaving. This is the job I want to do for the rest of my life. Because of the camaraderie, the togetherness. He works with multiple other veterans. And I was interested to learn this. Universal Studios, I asked a question about Universal in Orlando to the VP of hiring at Universal, and he said their staff is roughly 15% veteran. That's a big number to me. I was actually pleasantly surprised by that people have served in the military and then wound up working in these theme parks. And I'm sure Disney has a pretty strong percentage, believe it or not, because I see a lot of people with Disney with U.S. military service members. And
you know, one of the things you're talking about, it's interesting though, and I wonder about this, that you said he was an engineer and working on, or a mechanic and working on roller coasters, but that's not necessarily guest facing position.
Nope.
So my thought is this, and folks who are listening, you know, Chris, Mark, Matt, all those who are listening in the chat, share out on this. Are we seeing, especially for those cast members and team members, Disney, Universal, are we seeing fatigue coming into play because they're dealing with, as Mark says, you know, entitled guests and people taking advantage of the magic and all this other stuff? Is this fatigue that's showing that is, you know, to Matt's point earlier about, you know, some people say they, you know, love it and others just say, well, it's a job. Is this the fatigue that is finally showing up because all the cast members are just bombarded with guests?
Chuck, what else is happening in the world right now? Technology is coming out, right? So technology is making it a capability for one person to do three people's job. You lower staff, you're cutting positions, you have less front facing people out there. That means the people that are there are doing more work. And sometimes that's twice the work. It's hard to stay positive when you're overworked, especially in 97-degree heat. And, you know, when you're outside and working and doing this. Jen and I were at Magic Kingdom the other day on Sunday, and I rode Liberty Bell for the first time. I've never ridden it. I rode it. So I did something I've never done at Disney. But we rode Liberty Bell before it closed down, and we went over to Tom Sawyer's Island. And as we were coming back, Tigger and Pooh and the crew that does the meet and greet over there were coming out of their spot. And I was like, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, and I could feel sweat reeling down my, not to be gross, but like reeling down my back, my head soaked. And I looked at Tigger skipping through the park, and I'm thinking, good Lord, that dude needs a raise. Like, Tigger needs more money. And you start to think about how hard that is to keep a smile on your face. You know, I understand they're undercover, literally and figuratively, but that's got to be so hard to keep up your energy. You know, I understand they get breaks in heat. It rotates faster. It's a faster rotation. There's safety concerns in place. They have cooling packs or fans they can put in a lot of the suits now. But still, that's a tough job. And people have got to realize that, like, these jobs these kids have aren't easy. When you have to turn 1,000 people away because a ride's down and people have paid a lot of money, and it seems like Epic Universe has been dealing with this a lot, to be honest. Multiple rides down, 5, 6 of the 11 rides they have, half the park is closed. People are mad. But that sense of entitlement, like Mark talks about here, TikTok has led you to believe you're entitled to stuff. Do this, get something free. You know, they share these tidbits. When companies try to do the right thing or a nice thing, there's now, how can you scam it? Do you get it too? And it's a sad state of the world. It really is.
And hence, which also leads to why we've seen changes to the DAS card, why we've seen changes to disability as well, because people take advantage of it.
And look how mad people have gotten about that.
And it's not just the things that directly benefit the guests. It's things like seeing Woody and yelling, Andy's coming, and him falling down. And now we can't do that anymore because he'd be falling down on the ground all the time because everybody started doing it. So the cast members are coming up with these moments of magic, and they can't even use them anymore because it's overdone, even if it's not something where the guest gets a t-shirt or something free or whatever that may look like. Hawk, real quick, because you mentioned, you know, technology and AI and kind of that swap of people for machines and things. If we had Roy and Walt here at the same time with the level of technology we have now, I feel like that would be a bone of contention with them, with Roy wanting to do more, lean into the AI, lean into the technology, maybe get rid of some cast members because of the financial, side of things, with Walt saying, no, that guest service, like, we got to have the people, we got to have the cast members. I could see that being a huge problem for their relationship.
Well, and Walt and Roy had the most tumultuous relationship. That it was a love-hate thing. I mean, half the time they were buddy-buddy, hand in hand, and half the time they were at loggerheads all the time. That's well documented.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're both going to find out real quick that if you try to replace human, like customer service with AI, it's not going to work. Working in retail and doing the self checkouts, more people dislike those machines because of how they're constantly going down or don't work the way they want. They'd rather just deal with a regular person. So I
agree with that. And Matt, you're spot on that people would rather deal with that.
Well, right, but that goes back
companies would rather take advantage of the lack of payroll. And like, you're going to find the sweet spot somewhere in there. And unfortunately, it's still new enough technology that sweet spot hasn't been resolved yet. Because, I mean, you go into Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's these days, you have to order on an app.
Bojangles too, yeah.
Screen, I'm not an AI bot. Matt.
No, Hawk is definitely not an AI. We know that.
Matt, first, I mean, I may have some artificial intelligence, but
well, that's assuming he has intelligence to begin with. But getting back to our topic though, what would Walt do in response to Epic? One of the other areas that I wanted to kind of explore a little bit, and Meaghan, we'll start with you on this.
Valid point, Mark.
Epic did a beautiful job. Give credit where credit is due. Epic did an amazing job in its launch. They did a 6-hour live show, all promoting Epic with celebrities and everything like that. But if Walt were around, I think he would have basically said, yeah, hold my beer. And you would have seen, because think about it, he's the pro at this. The entire Disneyland show, and he has an entire network. It's called ABC. Actually, he's also got ESPN, but we'll leave the sports alone. We'll use ABC for this. He would have promoted, and I think he would have seen the wonderful world of Walt Disney continuing or returning to promote and highlight all of the various things going on in the theme parks. Meaghan, your thoughts?
I think that's true. I think Disney Plus would also play a huge piece of that. Because even our streaming services now, they're not ad free. So you get all of that in there. I definitely think if there was something that Walt was going to react to, obviously, I do think he would have known Epic was coming. I think people at Disney now knew Epic was coming. Because it's a small circle. Those people that are upper echelon at those two places, they kind of know, they hear rumblings, right? They know what's going on.
Well, given the fact that Disney lost several Imagineers to Epic, so they knew.
There were several Disney people that jumped ship.
But something like an opening ceremony, that show that they put on that day, for all the opening, I do think that might have been something that you would have to react to, because not everything, is out there or aware. And I think Walt would have definitely said, okay, we're going to do something bigger. What that would be, I have no idea. My brain doesn't move in that direction. But 100%, whether it's bringing in, all the voices of the characters who have come in over, and we've seen them, right? They've appeared more often. Or at least it feels like to me. We've seen, like Jodie Benson appear a little bit more, and some of the voices of those classic characters that people love, they're coming back around. We hear them a little bit more. I feel like Walt probably would have, I think a lot about Hamilton. We just hit the 10-year reunion of Hamilton. They did a performance at the Tonys a couple weeks ago. And the fact that Disney Plus has Hamilton now, I feel like Walt would have leaned in there somewhere. Like, obviously, Lin-Manuel Miranda has been really active with Disney anyway for years now with Moana and Encanto and so on. But I feel like Walt would have seen something there that he could have done with, bringing in that original cast and having them perform at like a launch of something that they're going to do. I can just imagine very little, but I do think Walt definitely would have tried to up the game there.
So I think there's a couple things that I find interesting in what you said, and I'm curious because you were really big on Epic's opening. Chuck, you really enjoyed it.
I thought that, so a little bit of backstory. I'm a television guy, so I've been doing TV for 30 years, and I do not just this live streaming. I do live streaming. That's part of what I do, and so watching it from a technical perspective was amazing. But the fact that they were able to bring the guests that did a free live stream and had different celebrities. Now, granted, they were all Universal related celebrities. This was all very planned.
They blew it.
All right, defend that because I'm not sure I agree with that.
I am going to tell you right now, Universal made one fatal flaw. They didn't invite the guests to the opening. And I don't care.
Are you talking about the opening day, or are you talking about the preview show the day before?
When you do that little hype preview fake BS for your social media influencers and people that are already elite, you are not taking care of the guest that bought opening day tickets to experience that park in all its grandeur.
Okay, we're talking about two different things.
I agree.
I'm talking about the day before. I'm not talking about that morning.
I know
that morning was a disaster.
The day before should have never happened. That's my point. The day before should have never happened. The grand opening of Epic should have been for the guests that paid admission to be there on May 22nd. There should have been no hoopla before that. It should have been that night for those people in the park. They got shorted for social media influencers and a bunch of actors and famous people that once again get promoted to be rewarded for being part of this big experience. They blew it. They alienated the Universal fan base on day one. That is why there was so much blowback for a number of weeks with how badly did they. People bought those tickets out, didn't even get a fireworks show. Nothing. No coins went out. The coins went out to the people that were the movie stars and the famous people. That doesn't take care of your fan base. This is the one thing Walt did amazingly well. He remembered who made his park happen. It was families and things. There's a different mindset in the world. Look at the way social media influencers are invited to, go highlight our new thing that's going to open, but we're not going to let the fans have it first. We're going to let your social media influencers have it first. There's so many ways that just alienates the purest fan, and it gets tough. And it's a big question because is the juice worth the squeeze? Yeah, you get free marketing from these influencers. That's great. But does it matter if it's on the night before, or can it be the day of? Invite them to join on the day of with the fans. Let them be in there with the actual people and experience for real, not fake lines and getting to go through with their cameras and all the special treatment that they get that others don't. It's not that I don't care about social media in that realm. I think they should be able to be social media influencers and should have opportunities to advertise and help the parks out. It's great. But don't forget your fans as you do that. And I think there's been such a push over the last few years for the Tim Trackers and the Nates and all these people that get an added bonus in the day ahead, or get to do it first, or get to experience this. And there's all this hype, and they give them all the goodies and the giveaways and the thank yous for these YouTube views they're going to get. But at the same time, fans no longer get to experience that stuff. And one of the great things early on, pre-social media, was a fan being able to say, I was there the first day. I was there on day one. I was there the day it opened. I have my e-ticket from going to Disneyland on the first day when it was $3.50 or whatever. It was $8 to join the park. I forget the actual price. That was a trivia question we did, and I can't remember what the price was. But go back and watch our 20 questions episode, or Price is Right episode on game night, and you can find out what that price was. But that, I think, is something that is a big difference with what goes on in the parks today versus when Walt was there. And you want to talk about what would Walt do? Walt would focus on the fans. And I think
okay, so I think you're right, and I'm going to let Meaghan go first because I know she's got a chunk. You're right to some degree, and I'll get to it.
Well, for me, what you said about the fans who are there on opening day. When was opening day? Because it was supposed to be May 22nd, but they started letting everybody in weeks before. If I was one of those people when Epic was announced and tickets were released for May 22nd, and I had bought a ticket, I would be furious. And it would have nothing to do with social media. It would have nothing to do with what happened on the 21st. It would have to do with the fact that they threw the doors open, the gates open.
They screwed up a lot with
everybody. That's what frustrates me. And that's where I feel
both.
I mean, you expect the team member previews. You expect the APs to be able to get in early. I don't love the way they did that to you all either, but you expect that. But for it to suddenly just be thrown open to anybody and everybody, they rolled it open to the hotels. They still didn't get what they wanted, so they threw it open even more. I think it's unfair to the people who were hotel guests, and then they got, the surprise of, oh, hey, you can buy a ticket to Epic, but it's going to cost you hundreds, if not thousands of more dollars than you've already paid to the days that there was a lot that went wrong for Epic, I think, in the month of May. I agree with some of your points about the 21st and things that went on and things that the influencers got. And there were agency owners that got invited for that same event and they got things that, the general public didn't. But I mean, bar none, if I was somebody who went out and bought a ticket for May 22nd, back when those were released, thinking I'm going to be one of the first people in this park, I would have been so mad.
At the very least, though, that opening night spectacular with the fireworks and the show should have happened on May 22nd.
Without a doubt. And that I agree. And so here's my point. So what Universal did really, really well, to their credit, is they did a great preview show. Here's the problem, and Hawk's exactly right, is that it really wasn't a preview show. That should have been for invited guests only. Hey, we're giving you a sneak peek at the park. We can't wait to open tomorrow. Come back, do whatever. And then tomorrow should have been the biggest friggin' blowout known to mankind. Now, what would Walt do? Again, back to our topic here as we start to wrap things up. Walt would have done that. He would have not opened the park up to regular guests or done whatever. I mean, let's just go to Piston Peak, okay? Because we're not going to have a full park here. A lot of times we're talking about the opening of a whole park, and right now I don't know that we're doing a fifth gate. Let's talk about just Piston Peak as an example, or Monsters Inc. One of the two, doesn't really matter. You would have had previews. You would have had sneak peeks with media and the influencers and all of that, but it would have been sneak peeks. But then launch day, July 22nd. Test Track is, by the way, opening on July 22nd. I just announced that. We'll use that as an example. Test Track, July 22nd. That day for the guests would have been a blowout. Here's a Test Track opening day pin. Here is, other special stuff that's going on. It would have been literally a blowout. And probably not even the first day. It would have been the first week.
But Epic, we discussed this a little bit, and I think where this was a unique situation, and we had touched on this, no theme park in its entirety, to my knowledge, has had sneak peeks prior to opening until Epic, because the cast member previews and that kind of stuff, I don't believe those went on.
Animal Kingdom had sneak peeks ahead of time.
For pass
I remember media.
Just for media. But I'm saying, like, the pass holder preview concept, I don't think had ever been done in a theme park. I think it's been done for rides and restaurants over recent years, but I don't think it had ever been done for a theme park. So in Universal's defense of my criticism, they had never done this. And they were trying to max rides that they were starting to have problems with. And they didn't have enough people to max the demand and needed more people coming through to try to do it. So I understand both sides, but I think where they blew it is not making fans feel like they were the priority. You made social media stars and your little, the specialty guests and all that stuff. You could have still invited those guests, had security around them, and done what Disney does every day of the year with bringing celebrities into parks while normal people are in there, you could have easily accommodated it and done it, and it would have been fine, and had them there for the opening with the fan base. And I think there were just numerous situations that added ticket sales. The original ticket sale to pass holders was done to go on May 22nd, or the first 3 months they opened those up to be able to be sold. You didn't get preview opportunity, and then they told you after the fact you were going to get preview opportunity. If you already bought those tickets, planned that trip, to Meaghan's point, you spent thousands. Now they want you to spend a couple hundred, and you might have to spend to fly down to go to the preview. Like, they kind of doubled up on, we're going to really stick it to them. And that's kind of how it felt. And it alienated a lot of people. And I think they didn't know what to expect. I think they honestly thought that park was going to be more of a screaming success than it has been. And I honestly foresee that within 6 months, I actually expect that to be an option on annual passes. I think it's not going to take long. I originally thought a year to 2 years before they'd open up that park to annual pass sales. I think you're going to be able to add Epic for an amount of money, and you might be regulated to midweek use. They might have some kind of stipulation on it, but I think that's going to be on an annual pass much faster than people thought. That's my guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Oh, sorry, guys, for those of you listening, and it just clunked the mic. Whoosh. So yeah, it is interesting. And again, getting back to our topic, what would Walt do? I think that the whole point behind, kind of what we wanted to talk about as we wrap up here, Walt would have found a way not only to respond, but also to, I think, get ahead of it. I think maybe Meaghan's point early on in the show might have been probably the number one point. When the word came out, hey, guess what? We're building a third official gate, Volcano Bay being a water park. We'll not call it a gate for a minute, but it's the third gate. Walt said, great, gate number 5, here we go. Because he would have gone in that way. I also think that by then he would have also wrestled Marvel away from Universal, but that's a whole nother topic. I don't think he would have stood for that any longer. So
one thing I'll touch on from Mark's comment here.
Yeah,
they did,
and Mark's comment is bang on right.
Yeah, they did limit crowds opening weekend. It was very limited sales. They're now up to, I believe they're allowing up to 24,000 people in the park on a given day, I think is the number I've heard. So I don't know that that's the factual number, but that's the number I've heard roughly, is about 24,000 people. So it is potentially more crowded than it's been at all. But opening weekend, they didn't want to overwhelm staff or food restaurants. They wanted to see how it would flow with the gates open and trying to have everything open. So it was nice to get in there opening weekend for the people I know that did it.
Right, that did it. So, well, we want to say again, this has been Mousekast, the podcast where the mind meets the magic. This is episode 77. What would Walt do in response to Epic? I want to say a huge thank you to Chris, Mark, Matt, who all joined us, and then of course here as well, our co-hosts Matt, Meaghan, Hawk, and guys, it's great to be back. This is another one of the many episodes that we do, and we do them live every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern, right here on our Facebook channel, right here on our YouTube channel. And so we want you to be right here every Tuesday night, joining in the conversation. As you saw, or listening, if you're listening on the podcast version, listen tonight. We kind of modified a little bit as the viewers came in and gave their comments. Our discussion varied a little bit as well, and that's the way it needs to be, and that's the way we want it to be. This is your podcast where the mind meets the magic, and so until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you for listening to Mousekast. We appreciate the time you share with us. And tonight was a very fun show, and joining us is a must. This is where the mind meets the magic, We dive a little deeper every time. Theme parks, cruise ships, and travel. If you don't listen, maybe now